FCA for donuts, from the FSA over to the FCA. Why do you want this license? And if you don't use it,
You lose it.
correct.
Direct authorisation.
What permissions would I need? IAR, introduced for appointed representative, and an AR. They want to understand the FCA, as I say, use plagiarising software.
This is John,
And this is Nick.
and this is How It Is.
So let's talk about FCA for donuts. I know we did a, what's the word? Sorry if that's the thing. I know we did a little video for it about, it's probably about 2 years ago, actually. Was
At
it?
least 2 years.
Yeah. We did a FCA for donuts. I think we should talk about some things. So we use a lot of jargon, which I tell off the sales guy internally. And, they do sometimes have a habit of passing that over to our customers. I say they want to understand what an LP is, for instance. So
Limited permission.
yeah, so let's break it down. I'm going to break it down. I'm going to mention a couple of words, and then we can explain it. We can discuss it together. I think that's the easiest way.
Yeah.
So if I tell you what, I'm a customer. I ring in and I go, I want to be FCA authorized. I want one of these CCLs.
Yeah.
Do you remember those?
So CCL was a consumer credit license
Yep.
by the Office of Fair Trading. I nearly said OFT. Pre 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
And some people still call it. It's funny how 10 years goes and people still know it as a CCL.
Yeah.
Effectively, they got replaced by direct authorization, as it should be called, really, with the FCA.
I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into that, because for me, there was a fundamental change. I think the OFT, what they used to ask for when I used to do those applications going back then, there's a lot of free type. And it's like, why do you want this
It
license?
was manual forms.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But it's, why do you want this license? Yeah. And you used to have several categories, and you could
A
just
to F, was it?
Yeah, that was it. And you could tick off exactly what you wanted. Would be no extra cost, and that was it. I think it was no extra cost.
Yeah, you used to tick every box, and some of them were like lending and stuff.
Yeah.
And effectively, if you wanted to, you could do it.
Yeah, it was bonkers. And then that change that went to was while the crossover from the FSA over to the FCA, you had interim permissions. And then the FCA came into fruition, was 2014, 2015 for consumer credit, I think it was. And they was like, we know why you want a license. Are you fit and proper to be able to facilitate and finance? And I think that was the big change.
That said, even back then, although they didn't let you have all the categories, there was very little checking going on.
You're
very little.
absolutely correct. On average, you would take about 2-3 weeks to get through. That's like got slightly longer in certain times. During COVID was one of the quickest times they would be approved. And then I think for me, the about a year and a half ago, when Sheldon Mills took charge of the FCA, that's when there was a big change in the applications and how that progressed through the system. And, what we have now with, all the policies and the business plans and everything like that. It was just before, do you have a business plan?
So on to that, that's something else that's needed now to get authorised.
What, business plan?
Yeah, business plan, certain policies and procedures, an understanding of the customers you're going to deal with.
And the permissions, if you cannot tick any little
No,
box.
you've got to know what you're going to be using it for.
Absolutely. And if you don't use it,
You lose it.
correct.
So there are some other different ways, though, of being authorised. There's 3 in effect, really, for our core customer, which is independent motor dealers.
Yep.
So we've got direct authorisation, which is what we've been talking about. So
Yep.
that's being authorised directly by the FCA. You have a licence. Your business name says it has a licence, as people would probably call it. You've got appointed representative.
Yep.
So that means another business has already been approved by the FCA, and they're allowed to put people under their license, like an umbrella, really, and take responsibility. That means you don't have to apply directly with the FCA. They apply on your behalf. They'll still check out you as individuals, but don't check out your policies and procedures and stuff. But you will need to follow the rules of that principal firm, which is let's call it an umbrella company. And the third one is introducer appointed representative. And a lot of people call that an introducer. Or some people go, oh, I'm not authorised. And you are to some degree. We won't get into the people who completely don't do it at all.
I think we need to explain fully on the difference between an IAR, introducer appointed representative, and an AR, and the pitfalls. And it's definitely pitfalls to being an I. We refuse. We being the compliance guys, we refuse to have any IARs.
Well,
that's because of risk.
Yeah, I don't think within the motor finance industry, specifically in motor dealers, that IAR can work. So to first explain what it is, if you're an introducer appointed representative, you're allowed to do two things. That is effect an introduction, which effectively means you're enabling an introduction to a finance company. And the reason it's not making an introduction is because it may be via your website rather than in person. And the second part is distributing a non-real-time financial promotion. Distributing means you are distributing it from the people who are authorised rather than making a promotion. The key difference there is it's not your promotion, it's theirs. And non-real time means it's not specific to that customer. So it can be a generic finance advert. It can have a representative example on there. That's the facts and figures involved in what a typical customer may have. But it can't be specific to the customer. So you can't have sliders and changes of deposit or variants for different customers. So one, it makes it quite restrictive. But I think the key thing is if someone walks into a motor dealer and says, how much is that Ford Focus on finance? And you go, what should happen in IAR is I can't discuss that. I can pass your details on to the finance company or the broker. They'll discuss it with you. If that customer goes, yeah, but I just want a rough idea.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, you're going to tell them.
Yeah.
I don't blame people like, you know what I mean? It's very difficult to say no because they're like, well, I can go down the road and someone will give me a full quote. It's very restrictive. IAR for me should be online businesses or businesses where the finance is really, really secondary. So in a lot of other retail areas, they only want to sell an iPad, let's say. If you want finance, scan the QR code, sort it out. But finance is so fundamental to car sales.
Absolutely.
That a bit of advice or, coaching or explanations is always going to come in.
Yeah.
So I think it's very difficult to stick to that introducer. And ultimately, how do the principal firm, the umbrella company, the broker, how do they check what's going on and make sure it's not gone? It's impossible to monitor an in-person conversation.
Yeah, it's bonkers. And, the amount of dealers ring us and say, I want to be able to sell cars, but I don't want an FCA license.
It's kind of the point.
And you go, yeah, but that's exactly it. I go, when my mate does it, and go, okay, all right, so my youngest daughter or my eldest daughter is 17. She hasn't passed the test yet. She can drive to a certain extent. She could probably drive to London and back and get away with it. She crashes, she's going to know about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, you could do it, you're going to get caught, then it's going to be a house of cards.
Yeah, it's just good for people to have the know the options and know the limitations. So I don't think the limitations always get stated.
That's exactly right.
When some brokers will go, just become an introducer. Let's be honest, it's their way of getting more business.
Yeah, and tying that.
But, it doesn't mean that the dealer can do what they need to do.
Well, normally there's hardly any commission as well for the dealer and so on and so forth. And it goes back to you not being able to advertise it.
I think also one thing that people need to realise there is under appointed representative and direct authorisation.
Yeah.
As long as you've got approval of the principal, you can go and deal with anyone you like.
Absolutely.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Certainly within our market with principal firms. But with introducer, you have to have that status for each broker or, realistically means you're tied into that one provider.
Okay, so we've discussed direct authorization, introducer appointed representatives and appointed representatives. So if I'm a car dealer, what permissions would I need?
So generally it's going to be limited permission.
Yep.
And it's called limited to secondary credit broking, which is so effectively selling the car is the primary activity.
Yep.
Secondary to that is making introductions to finance companies.
Yep.
If you ever hear full permission, sometimes we hear people go, I want full authorization.
Yeah.
And what they mean is direct authorization.
Yes,
and full permission is, well, it could be a range of things, but in motor finance, it's brokering where you don't provide the car. So it's what a finance broker would do.
So as well as credit brokering, what else would I need?
So strangely, this always comes as a surprise, is debt permissions.
Yep.
When you've got a customer coming in who's got a settlement outstanding on the vehicle, you need to discuss it. So that's classed as debt counselling. And you need to be able to settle it off with the finance company. That's debt adjusting.
Yep.
Sounds scary. They just put, again, a limitation, which is limited to settlement of vehicle finance. But there are plenty of people who don't ask for those permissions,
Yep.
and then they'll get picked up by the lender. So it's
Well,
important to
again,
make sure
it's
you've got
going
the right
back
ones.
to when I first started doing limited permissions for dealers, and there were other compliance companies out there. So this is before the compliance guys, and they would just do the credit brokering. And then what would happen is the finance companies come along and say, "Where's your debt adjusting and debt counselling?" They go back to that compliance house and they'd say, "Oh, you didn't put them on. You go, you didn't ask. Therefore, it's another grand or what have you." They used to charge them.
Crazy.
I know, absolutely. It's like, but we've always been
Get good
upfront.
advice.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, okay. Are we gonna do you want to dig down deeper into what not necessarily our services on this, but just the actual being directly authorized, or what the FCA would need, or should we use that for another day?
Yeah, I think it's just fair to say you're going to need to get policies and procedures, and and how compliance works in your business.
Sorry, but on that, you say get policies and procedures. If you get them off the internet, the FCA, as I say, use plagiarizing software, and they say, we've seen this before.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Every policy that we give to a dealer is bespoke. And that's across all of the sectors that we deal with, is bespoke. We have people writing those policies day in, day out.
And the reason they have to be bespoke is because you will be expected to live them afterwards.
Yeah.
So, they can't just be, this is what someone should do. The FCA judge it on, are you doing that? Will you be doing that? Can you do it?
Yeah.
Does that match with your business? So you obviously then, once you're authorised, have to demonstrate, whether it's with reporting, which is getting beefed up, or, maybe even just check by your lenders, or God forbid a claims management company comes along and says, did you actually do this? You need to make sure that you can live those policies.
And understand your own policy.
Yeah.
Definitely. So if you've got a vulnerable customers policy, the FCA will ask you, give me 3 examples of a vulnerable customer.
I think one of the good things about the process being beefed up now is that people who do go through that authorization process have to take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So when they get authorized, they genuinely know at least a bit about compliance. Whereas I think in some of the past, people are like, I'll fill a form and I'll get a license, but I don't actually know anything about what I'm supposed to be doing. So I think the people getting approved now are actually of a better standard in compliance at the point of entry than they were before.
And also they understand their business better.
Yeah.
After it, and that gives me that warm, funny, fuzzy feeling inside. So that we've kind of shown them the way, and it made them understand their own business better. Okay, so you're FCA authorized now.
Mm-hmm.
You've come to us. How about your ongoing responsibilities?
Well, so there's obviously some reporting. I mean, I think there's 2 categories to this. There's the things you should be doing every day,
Yep.
which you may or may not get pulled up on, but
Yep.
ultimately, well, you see the court stuff going on. Ultimately, it's going to show out in the wash. But then you've also got the statutory filings to the FCA. So you've got 4 or 5 different reports that need to go back to the FCA, which is data returns, details checks, attestations, things like that. But then you've also got, these processes and policies we've touched on. But then you've also got the fees. So there is an annual fee to the FCA,
Yep.
which goes up every year, I'm afraid, just like your Tesco shop.
Which wasn't there when with the old consumer credit licenses. They used to have a maintenance payment after about 5 years,
5
I think
years,
it was. And if you didn't pay the maintenance payment, what happened?
They just took it off you.
Yeah, you'd lose your license. So that you'd have that up until let's say the 30th of April or whatever it is, bosh, gone. And you'd have to reapply for your license again, and it was a hell of a thing. And I think that mindset is still in place with a lot of dealers at the moment. They think, I don't want my license, I'm just going to walk away from it. You can't do that.
I think it's actually worth touching on why the fee exists, the annual fee, and how it's made up. this isn't to say I agree with it or the cost or who pays it, but just to kind of explain why it's there and what it's for. And it's the FCA set their budget for what they need or think they need to run the organisation through the year. And that is broken down across all the firms that are authorised by the FCA. And there are different bandings. Obviously, the lenders pay more than the brokers pay more than the dealers, and that goes across crypto, insurance, absolutely everything. But ultimately, they make their budget based off how many firms are authorised.
Yep.
So they will say car dealers, for instance, pay between £500 and £1,000, depending on what it is. And that's the idea, is it just pays their budget. So that's why it doesn't really matter whether you've done a little bit of finance or quite a lot. That fee's similar because you are paying to run the FCA effectively.
I bet they love that. Don't dealers just love that?
But it's also why
to regulate you.
It's also why I think when people come to get authorised, if I speak to them on the phone, I always explain that you're not giving them more money because some people are like, well, I'm paying them this fee. They must want that money.
Yeah, it doesn't
and
matter.
It really doesn't matter to them. What you're actually offering them is more risk.
Yep.
Would you like more risk and more oversight, but you're actually going to get the same money because they get their budget regardless of how many firms are authorised. So it's really important when you go to the FCA, you don't just think, I'm a business, they must give me a license. It's like, what are you going to do to help customers? Why is this not much risk? And why is it more beneficial than what's already there?
So what are the costs?
Ongoing
costs.
Yeah, so ongoing costs is the FCA fee. And then realistically, other than that, it's going to be internal costs because whether it's your time or whether it's systems, you're going to need to make sure that you do at least some compliance. And obviously then if you get an outside firm to support your ongoing cost, just bear in mind that you're not just paying for a small service, but you're paying for their expertise, their knowledge, their staff costs, the time it's taken to get all that together. And that's expensive. There's a lot goes into it.
And for a limited permission application for a regular car dealer, the highest package or the most expensive package we sell, all encompassing compliance, is £189 a month, right?
Depending on the number of users.
Yeah, depending on the number of users. Or something I always say is that is the cheapest compliance manager you'll ever employ. You know, and it's like for somebody to not even bother with that, I just find it crazy, absolutely crazy. But hey, that's me. So what else? Let's see. What about you? We say what the ongoing costs are and regulation and things like that. How about if I say the words conk and 3? There's something.
Financial promotions.
Financial promotions. Now I've seen some.
Use some jargon there.
Yes,
conk.
I did that on purpose. Right? Conk is the Consumer Source Book. I think it's
Consumer Credit Source Book.
Yeah. Well, 673 pages. Well, that's what I've read in the past, and that's how this whole thing started back in the day at First Response.
And that's just one of the source books.
Print, CISC, I can't remember.
Fees.
Yeah, there you go. So you got all that.
ICOBs, MCOBs,
Yeah.
all sorts.
Right. So anyway, I've seen some extremely scary letters from the FCA, right, regarding financial promotions. Nicholas, can you explain what a financial promotion is?
It's what you call an advert or anything that a customer sees that's been put out by your business that's regarding finance. It can just be your website.
Yep. Where do we see a lot of problems? Well, do you know what? If I was to give you a percentage on how many websites are absolutely 100% correct out there within our sector, what percentage would you say?
Well, I would probably even pull all the main dealers into this, and it's probably, I'm going to be generous and say 5%.
Absolutely. Which is a really scary thing.
One of the reasons is people think, well, they expect their website company to be compliance experts.
Yep.
And while I can understand it may be a reasonable assumption to say, well, they've made a website for me, it should be compliant. They're not your business. So while they will put some templated things in that make it, do have some compliance in, ultimately it's up to you to say, this is how I want my website. And so if your website has just been published without being checked there's a good chance it's not compliant. And I honestly don't blame the website
Do you
companies.
think
in
as
that.
well, because of the FCA's, they leave everything open to interpretation? So, let's use the disclosure. We are a credit broker and, so on and so forth. Everybody but everybody puts it at the bottom of the page. Now, we speak to the FCA on a daily basis. Where do they say you have to put it?
Well, the credit broker, not a lender statement has to. Well, there's two sections. Some things have to be prominent, which basically means a customer is likely to see that alongside other things or will reasonably see it. The credit broker, not a lender statement, is supposed to draw attention to it, which means it needs to be significantly almost more prominent, which means it's at the top. If it's down at the bottom, it's not going to get seen. The disclosure can be at the bottom, but there are plenty of things that do need to be further up. We try to do caring, not scaring, and I think people do see the fines in the lenders and banks and go, they've been fined £100 million, and a lot of people think, well, that won't happen to me. But there are some statutory fines. If you don't do any of your filings on time, there's a £250 charge. Yeah. But you know what's bigger than that sometimes is that if you get one of those fines, it's actually on your record. Yeah. So if you ever want to change your permissions or do another business, they will pull up that you've had that in another business or in the past, and it really affects you for the future.
And especially if, going back to not closing your license down properly, if you don't close that down properly, you can kiss goodbye to ever having another license again. Yeah. Because they will trace that.
Yeah.
Date of birth, national insurance number, all these things.
Yeah. A lot of people think that if you just close the business, the license will close, and you do need to go and do it with the FCA. I would say to a lot of people, and you're still a young person. You go within the next 30 years of your working life. You might be in your 40s, but you might work for another 30 years.
And make sure all your fees are up to date as well.
Yeah, get your fees done, get your reporting done, get your license closed down properly, because if at any point in the future you want to work in financial services or have another business with a license, that is going to seriously affect you. So get it done properly.
So, I think we've covered fines, regulation, ongoing compliance, bit of jargon going on there. Anything I missed?
I don't think so, no.
Apart from subscribe and like.
Is that our compliance bit? Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment.
Yeah, we should do. That's what we've been told to do by the gaffer, isn't it? So, there you go.
Yeah.